GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, by Jasmine, Brittany, Morgan, and Caroline.
In this presentation, we will go over what exactly are geographic information systems. We'll take a brief look at the context of the country of Brazil. We'll review a case study of GIS use in Brazil for the study of malaria distribution. We'll critique this use and then provide some questions for critical thinking.
A Geographic Information System, GIS, as it is better known, is a system that is designed to capture, store, manipulate, analyze, manage, and present all types of geographical data. It has two parts, a geographic portion which focuses on locations, and an attribute data component which gives more information about spatial features. The geographic portion is what you would normally see on a map. It shows you cities, it can show you specific lakes, it can show you countries, where there are specific stores. It can show anything that you would find on a map. While the attribute data spatial feature portion shows you information that you can't find on a map normally, but it gives you more information, such as number of measles cases in a specific region, or how many people have diabetes in a specific town. It gives you more detailed information about anything you want to know related to that specific geographic area. People decide what they want to demonstrate and use methods to acquire the data, as well as put the data into the software or hardware program to acquire maps that show their information. The map can have multiple layers that can be added or removed at will. A layer can show when houses were built, what income is like in that region, and cases of measles, or other examples would be showing you how many dogs are in each house on average in a specific town. The point of the layers is to give you more information. You can keep adding layers to get you more and more information about a specific geographic region, or you could remove layers if you don't want as much information. The bottom layer is always just the map, the specific region, whatever you're focusing on, that you would find on a regular map. GIS involves people and methods working with the software hardware program, and this allows the users of GIS to do spatial analysis, display information on maps, and manage large amounts of data. There are many purposes and uses for GIS. It can be used to solve problems, make decisions, or visualize information. Because of its many uses, businesses, government agencies, and scientists alike all can use GIS, and many do. It can be used to map features, as well as show the relationship between features. An example would be mapping cases of malaria in relation to water sources, or just mapping cases of diabetes in the town of Pueblo. It can be used to map the amount of something, such as trees, cases of measles, dogs, cats, or even lakes with a specific type of fish. It can map densities, such as births per day in a specific hospital, or deaths per year, just in the whole world, perhaps, or in a country. It can be used to determine what is inside an area of focus, such as what houses may be in the path of floodwater, or what houses aren't built up to code in California for earthquakes. It can be used to see what is close to a phenomenon, such as if a group is sick, it can be used to see if there's a water source nearby, a trash dump, or some other potential cause of the illness. Often for seeing what is close to a phenomenon, you can use multiple layers in GIS to look at different information around what might be causing it. Some of those layers you might delete because you realize it doesn't have any specific correlation to what the phenomenon you're looking at, but that is part of the point of having the different layers. It can also be used to map change, such as the growth of a city in 10 years or the deforestation in the last 100 years. GIS can be used by government agencies to determine problems in areas of poverty, or even just which regions of the country have a lot of poverty. Epidemiologists may use GIS to discover what is the source of an illness that is spreading, or that can be on a big scale, such as like an epidemic, or it can be on a smaller scale, such as just in a tiny town. Businesses also can use GIS for the purpose of finding what kind of people are in their area and what those people might want to buy if they will buy their product. In these ways, GIS is extremely helpful for multiple people and has many purposes.
Brazil was first settled by the Portuguese in the 16th century. The Portuguese established sugarcane plantations along the northeast coast of the country. Portugal recognized Brazil as an independent nation, finally, in 1825, after quite a bit of political turmoil. Portuguese is still the first language used in Brazil. The capital of Brazil recently moved from Rio de Janeiro inward to more central Brasilia. Brazil is the fifth most populous country in the world, with a population of over 209 million people, an annual growth rate of 0.8%, and actually a growing indigenous population. It's quite large. The area of Brazil is just slightly smaller than the area of the 48 continental United States. The geography of Brazil is quite diverse. There's over 4,600 miles of Atlantic coastline. It's also the home of the Amazon rainforest and the Amazon River basin. It is split into 5 geographic regions. The north, which is less populated, this is the Amazon rainforest area, so it's a lot more tropical. The northeast is home to more than a quarter of the population, has a high unemployment rate and poverty rate. This area is really dry and hot, so they don't have a lot of industry or agriculture. The central west has actually seen a lot of migration moving inward from the coast, partially at least because the capital just moved to central Brasilia. This area is quite diverse, though, geographically, with forests, highlands, and wetlands. The southeast is the most densely populated area of the country. This is where Rio de Janeiro is. It's an economic center with mineral wealth and with tourism. And then the south is the smallest region. Economic diversity, meaning that there is a large gap between the poor and the wealthiest in this area. Brazil is classified as an upper middle income country with a Human Development Index score in the high human development range and a GDP per capita of about $8,900. The poverty gap, however, is still quite large, with 26.5% of the population living below the national poverty line. Health metrics are a little difficult to find for Brazil, as the most recent demographic and health survey was only posted in 1996. They do have a national health survey, however, which most of these other health metrics are pulled from in 2014. The fertility rate was 1.7 births per woman. The female and male life expectancies were 79 and 72 years respectively. The infant mortality rate and maternal mortality ratio have actually declined in recent years. So infant mortality rate is 13.2 per 1,000 live births, and maternal mortality ratio of 58.2 per 100,000 live births. These reflect positive forward motion in fertility planning, in access to maternal care and care provided by skilled providers, which has been a goal for Brazil in recent years. Brazil is also still working on improving their sanitation and water sources. Brazil has declared a water crisis in 2018, as still 5 million of their population is using unimproved water sources, and a lot of the population with improved water sources have unreliable access to those sources, whether the sources are not reliable in functioning, they have a long distance to get to them, things of that nature, and so maybe more are using the unimproved water than is reported. There's a physician density in Brazil of 1.85 physicians per 1,000 people. Brazil had an agreement with Cuba to import Cuban doctors. Because of political reasons and political statements that have recently made the news, Cuba has withdrawn a lot of the doctors from Brazil, and Brazil is now left with a physician shortage. There are some data available for the prevalence of HIV, 0.6% of the population testing positive, and incidence of malaria, 5.13 cases per 1,000 population at risk. This graphic is of the malaria incidence recently, so I wanted to kind of show how it had been decreasing, and then within the last 3 to 4 years, we're seeing a stark increase in malaria cases. And there's a lot of data out there about the incidence increase of malaria and signs of climate change and mosquito population migration. So to delve just a little bit further in those health metrics, here are some current health issues that Brazil is facing. The first infographic shows what causes the most deaths, and it shows the change between 2007 rankings and 2017 rankings. We can see that the top causes of death in Brazil are all non-communicable diseases, with the exception of lower respiratory tract infection and interpersonal violence and road injuries. Similarly, the causes of premature death do not really include communicable disease. However, we can see that interpersonal violence has risen to the top of premature death, which shows that there may be some violence in Brazil of concern. However, communicable disease in Brazil is all over the media. Because of climate change and poor sanitation and water and poverty in Brazil, we do see communicable disease, including vector-borne diseases like yellow fever, dengue, and malaria. And then we see communicable diseases like measles, mumps, rubella, tuberculosis, polio, tetanus, and influenzas. A success of Brazil, however, is their national immunization program, which has had huge success in vaccinating for a lot of these conditions. Unfortunately, Brazil has a similar issue to the United States with a large anti-vaxxer type population. So they have had several measles outbreaks, in recent years.
Not long ago, Brazil reported the lowest amount of malaria since 1975. Despite this milestone, the disease has reemerged, hitting the Amazon basin region the most. 99.8% of all cases in the country occur here in this region. For this reason, the study used for this report aimed to interpret the effects of economic development and frontier expansion in the Amazon basin by using GIS to create spatial mapping and better comprehend the circulation of this communicable disease. The reasoning behind this decision is based on the fact that the Anopheles mosquitoes have a preference for hot and humid areas, which makes the rainy dense forests and numerous bodies of waters throughout the Amazon basin region a sizable danger zone. Therefore, with the ample knowledge of these and other environmental factors already available, researchers are looking now to explore other effects on disease circulation. The regional expansion here in Brazil is largely due to extraction of natural resources. This ultimately creates deforestation and shifts in urbanization and human mobility. The process of expansion and occupation into an area within this region is comprised of 3 steps according to the study. The first step involves higher rates of deforestation from logging, clearing out for residential and agricultural areas, and the study proposes a high incidence of malaria is correlated to this distinctive shift, and they coined the term frontier malaria to describe this phenomenon. The second phase involves a slight decline in incidence of malaria as the conditions in the area continue to improve over time. More resources become available, roads and settlements are refined and made better and cleaner. The final stage is known as stabilization. Conditions again steadily improve here in this phase. Resources continue to expand and there is minimal environmental changes made to the area. For the analysis, the Amazon Basin region was divided into the three sections seen in the graph, which distinguish different phases of occupation. The first phase is highlighted in orange. This is known as the Consolidated Settlement Zone. It is most known for industries of logging, cattle ranching, and soybean production. There is a dense urban network within this area, including several medium-sized cities and state capitals, and also a roadway system. The second zone, known as Central Amazon, is the tannish yellow color, and the primary industries in this region are logging, livestock, soybean production, as well as mining. This area has the second highest population density. The third region is known as the South and West Hialeah Settlement. This area is primarily known for forestry, for acai and Brazil nuts, as well as logging, fishing, and survival agriculture. In this region, there's primarily only small towns, and it does have a significantly less population. This area is also home to the Amazon River Valley. Maps based on municipal digital grids and population data from the years 2005 to 2013 were created using GIS. Health and socioeconomic factors, as well as annual parasite incidence, or API, were all indicators that were added as well and organized in GIS mapping. The API was calculated through an interesting process known as inverse distance weighting, which is an ArcGIS application which estimates the value of a determinant in a non-sampled area based on surrounding areas. Another map was created to look at the trend of disease over time as well. For the results, data sets from 4 specific years show the real numbers between the years 2003 and 2013 are decreasing overall, meaning those affected by malaria are decreasing. The distribution data, however, is showing that there are particular regions affected more heavily. What the data shows is an overall minimal effect in the consolidated settlement area, seen in the bluish colors at the bottom. And resources, again, there are more established and there are minimal changes to the physical environment. In the middle Central Amazon zone, there are areas of high impact, particularly in the northern region. This can be explained by the fact that this area in the northern part of the Central Amazon is still considered a hub for human migration to and from the Amazon to other regions of the country. Additionally, this Central Amazon region has seen a decline in dispersal recently due to urbanization and improved working conditions. The final section, the South and West Settlement Zone, has seen consistently high incidence of malaria despite having a lower population. Finally, I'd like to look now at the map of evolution of occupation and the frontier malaria effect. In this figure, we can see the lighter color depicts epidemics that occurred in the earlier years of the study period, whereas the darker red color is from more recent occupation. A relationship can clearly be seen between new areas being developed, resources being extracted, and malaria incidence. The mapping also showed that the relationship between the effects of malaria and expansion did vary depending on annual disease trends and the type of expansion efforts of the time, which fluctuated over the study period. Finally, the API showed decreased values for all areas through the mapping, but was still the highest in areas near the Amazon River and the South and West Hialeah development area. This can be explained by the amount of protected environmental areas that are still in this region, as well as the excessive extraction of acai and Brazil nuts. So the critique was based off of the research article called Spatial Spread of Malaria and Economic Frontier Expansion in the Brazilian Amazon. Specifically, there was an illustration of the vulnerability of this process that was able to highlight the importance of understanding the disease transmission dynamics over time. They were also able to do this in different settings in order to maintain the gains achieved by malaria control and elimination programs. Overall, though, the study did show a lack of synchrony between the prevailing malaria control programs and the occupation model of the pioneer fronts. They did this because there are still specific geographic locations favoring the disease transmission. And this dynamic setting overall, combined with these conditions, severely limits organizational attempts in order to minimize the malaria risk in tropical ecosystems and serves to promote disease transmission. They did find 3 important limitations to this study. The first was that it drew mainly on secondary data with the potential for inaccurate information and omission of relevant variables. So some examples were just general over-reporting or under-reporting. Secondly, the annual parasite incidence, or the API, was adopted as an indicator of malaria transmission risk and was used to classify areas by an estimated disease incidence rate. And then the third limitation that the study found was that since the API spatial interpolation only provided an estimate of a value based on other known values, the distribution of malaria cases and low data density in some municipalities may have impacted the quality of the overall results. They did find there were some strengths of the study as well as recommendations for further studies. They did identify 4 distal socio-environmental determinants of malaria at the distal level that did act as economic drivers interrelated with the risk of malaria in the Brazilian Amazon. So those 4 socio-environmental determinants were roads, dam construction, industrial mining, and central Amazon and south and west Himalaya settlement zones. This overall, the factors increase the likelihood of malaria transmission, and considering that the dynamics of the malaria health disease process can be affected differently, each zone according to territorial occupation with its individual economic specialization. Currently, travelers and tourists are known to be at a greater risk of malaria. However, there should be further studies in more depth, as well as studies who harbor in on male individuals, which have been associated with the risk to get sick for P. falciparum, but weakly. If young men in the population move in endemic areas with high incidence rates and adverse social conditions, they might experience other social determinants, which reflect social determination and gender asymmetry in malaria incidence. Some of those risks specific are to the individuals that are working that are greater because they disproportionately live in situations of social stratification that are caused by differential access to land, as well as the social mobility of those individuals or families. Our critical questions that we have for our group, the first is, do you think that GIS was useful in understanding malaria in Brazil? And should the sources of information be checked before trusting GIS results? And our second critical question is malaria eradication realistic within this area? If so, what role does GIS play and what other strategies or investments would you consider?